My name is Jack Dygola. I was born in Dobrzyn, Golub, in Poland. It wasn't a very big city. It was a small town. And I went to public school. And I went to Cheder in the afternoon.
Was that every day?
Yes, every day. And it was fairly normal. I had a brother that was 2 years younger than me.
And his
name was Shmuel Dygola. My father was an actor and a part-time cantor. He traveled in different cities and he performed. He performed in some big cities, in Lodz, which was second largest city in Poland. He was very talented. He finished Conservatory of Music in Moscow. My mother was the homemaker. Yeah.
And did you have a large family living in Dobrzyn?
Yes.
Tell me about them.
Well, my father had a sister living in Dobrzyn with a big family. He had other sisters, but they were not in Dobrzyn. One was in Argentina, and one in New York.
So they had already left Europe.
Yes,
at that
yes.
point. But
yeah.
you had a large family, extended cousins.
Oh yes, a lot of cousins from my mother's side too, because my mother's side of the family, the Altoroviches, had a bakery, and there were a lot of brothers, and they also lived in Dobrzyn.
So they were in the bakery business, your mother's
Yes,
family?
yes, my mother's side of the family. All the holidays were celebrated. And we used to get together with our aunts and cousins and with the family mainly, yes. My father died in 1937 in Lodz. He was there for a performance and he had a heart attack and he died. Now my mother was left with myself and my brother. In 1939, being the location where the part of Poland where I come from was the corridor, which was Germany at one time. So it took just hours, and we had the German army and airplanes and shootings and everything in our hometown. There was being in again. Where a lot of German people lived in my hometown before the war, like in 1937 and 38, we could see on the street walking around with swastikas and armbands and stuff like this. Mm-hmm. And they were breaking windows and putting up signs and beatings. And there were incidents daily. But then when excuse me. But then when the German army entered, and we knew right then and there. Well, I was with my mother and my brother. And I don't remember if it was the next day or 2 days later when there was an announcement that all of us should get on, like in small towns, they had like a marketplace in the center of the town. And that's where we all had to come out. Very frightening, because we didn't know what was going to happen, and we saw incidents. They took away some young men, just took him off the streets, and not mostly, all Jewish. Some of my neighbors and so on, we didn't know what they did with him. And then the rest of us, like I said, they told us to come in the market. They chased us out, as a matter of fact. They went from door to door. Well, you could hear the boots and the sticks and rouse, rouse. And my mother took the 2 little kids, myself, my brother and myself, and we also went. And we got an order to give up any gold or any money, any valuables, and they're gonna let us go back to our homes, which it wasn't true. they chased us out from our homes and told us to leave. Well, some people they arrested, some they beat, and my mother took my brother and myself and said, we're going to run to my home town where I come from, and this is in a farm, and maybe we'll get away from all of this, not realizing that it's going to go on for years. No possessions, nothing, absolutely.
So you ran then to be where your mother's family was, and what was the name of the village that you went to?
Sierpc.
How far was that?
Roughly, I don't know if it took us a whole day or... It wasn't too far.
How did you travel?
We traveled by walking, and my mother went some wagons. You know, in Poland there's a lot of horse and wagons on the roads. There were no cars at that time. And I remember she put my little brother on the back of a wagon and myself. I jumped on it and she ran after us. You know, ran with the wagon. If the horses went faster, she ran faster. If they slowed down. And then if the thing turned a different road, she grabbed us off and we continued walking until the next one and so on, until we got to that place. Well, that's where my mother came from. Well, we went to, my mother had sisters and a brother and a sister and the children living there. So we were all together in one house. But there was no school and there was no nothing, and we were just there. And as a matter of fact, my uncles used to go to some farms and ask for flour, for an example, so they could bring back to make bread, bake bread and stuff like that. Almost like begging. We were there until one night trucks pulled in.
What do you remember about that?
Oh, it was horrible. The yelling and the crying, and because we thought that was the end, they're going to take us out in the backyard and either shoot us or whatever they were going to do. Mm-hmm. Well, they put us on trucks, and they kept on yelling, "Schnell," you know, were soldiers or gendarmes, really. And they put us all on a truck, and if I remember right, they stopped on the way where we were going in another place and picked up some more people. So they had their knowledge of where they were. Those were like leftovers around, and yeah, a few people here and a few people there, and they took us to a ghetto. Mm-hmm. We left everything. There was nothing to take. I mean, they wouldn't allow anything to take, so whatever we had on, that's how we left. And we arrived at the ghetto called Zagorow. We drove inside, and they told us to get off the trucks, because there were other trucks too that looked like they were surrounding from all over to put those people in this place. And well, being a child, I cried, I guess, and held on to my little brother and stuff like this, and that was it. Inside, they had Jewish police and a Jewish appointed somebody, and they're the ones that assigned us to a place, because the ghetto was formed from regular street houses. They were just surrounded with wire and one entrance. It was a house with bunk beds, and I would say about 20-some people in the room. Every day there were gendarmes coming into the ghetto and taking people, requesting from the Jewish police, "I need 60 men, young, strong men," which there weren't too many in the ghetto, and to take him to work on some kind of, and one day, I know it was to work because one day I wound up as a 10-year-old. We were digging some holes or trenches or whatever you call it, on a daily routine. Well, this one particular incident which I'll never forget about this young girl. I don't know if it was for a show or if they were filming it or what it was, but one day only, they had this beautiful young girl, maybe 16, 17, in a cage. And it looked like it was a made cage with wooden, with bars. And they had her in there like an animal, like you put a tiger or a cat, or they had her in there. And she was all full of holes. She was being eaten alive from lice, covered with lice. And I'll never forget that. And of course, some kids made fun being little kids and stuff, but it was just horrible to look.
They put her on display.
Yes, I would think that's what it was.
Did they force the town people to look
Yes,
at her?
whenever there were incidents of any thing, the people were forced to come out, yes. There were orders, yes.
As an adult now, when you look back on that, is there any reason in your mind, the purpose for doing that?
Well,
Just to instill fear.
that's right. As a matter of fact,
There was another incident that
yes.
you witnessed as a 10-year-old boy. Tell me about
Yes,
that.
I witnessed a hanging of 20 people in the ghetto. And they made sure that everybody saw, because they put children and small people in front and the other people in the back, so everybody could see. And there were orders of, we were surrounded with military, with machine guns. All of us and they gave orders that there shouldn't be one person in the house. Everybody has to be out on that day. And they were going from house to house searching also. They found somebody, they probably shot them. You see, there was no refrigeration, right, at that time. So, like eggs and butter and things people used to keep it in the cellar. This was the kind of cellar. And they put them in there 3 weeks prior to this day, that when they announced what they're going to do with them.
Do you know how they were chosen?
No, off the street. So some of them had young wives, some had mothers, young men, they're like in their 20s. And it was so tragic that I wrote a verse about that day. And it's in Yiddish. And it was written in 1941. In ein Dienstag in der Früh ist gekommen in der Ghetto Gendarmerie. Hat sich in der Ghetto gemacht am Himmel, als man hat 20 Männer vernommen. Man hat sie bald in eine Keller reingeführt, was man hat dort einmal Eier gemliert. Und man hat bald Polizei herumgestellt, als die Menschen sollen nicht kennen und kicken kein Welt. Sie sind in dem Keller 3 Wochen abgesessen. Sie haben schon verloren den Appetit zum Essen. Sie haben alle ausgesehen und gedacht, weil sie haben verstanden, was sie wart. In ein Mittwoch in der Früh ist gekommen Gestapo mit Gendarmerie, hat sich ein Ghetto gemacht, ein Geläuf, als man hat gebringt die Tlies beim Keller auf den Häuf. Man hat alle Männer herausgejuckt von den Stieben und man hat sie geheißen Gruben grieben. Und ein paar Männer hat man nach Tischen geschickt und die 20 Männer haben sich alles zugekickt. Wenn das alles ist schon fertig gewesen, hat kein kleines Kind nicht geturrt bleiben in sein Heim. Von klein bis groß hat sich alles gemusst zu kicken, wie man verleichte 20 Mann die Stricken. Kein Träger hat man nicht getult lassen gießen, oder nicht wollte man getun in die Tumor reinschießen. Die Gendarmerie ist gewähnt, die Jiden zu scheit, mit den Büchsen in der Hand greit. Sie sind 7 Schuhe gehangen auf die Schneiden, bis man hat sie ungeheuben zu spüren. Man hat jeden herabgenommen, a Steifen von der Schnee, und man hat ihn aufgehackt auf eine harte Vier. Man hat sie nicht bei Sender zu scheit, nur man hat sie zusammen in ein Grieber eingelegt. Das soll schon sein das letzte Mal von dem ganzen Kolam Yisrael. Yitzchak Dygola, that was my name in Yiddish. So I didn't know if I was going to survive or not, and I wrote this verse. And of course, I could only write it in Yiddish. They gave an order within 5 minutes or 3 minutes, not a person should be on the street. And we were surrounded with the machine guns. And the kids were in the front. So when they gave that order, everybody started to run to the closest door or the closest apartment. And I didn't get to my home. I ran to the closest apartment. I remember there must have been on the steps, on the whatever, must have been hundreds of people in that one. It was the closest to run to, because you didn't want to be found on the street. This thing, I think, was also filmed, because being in that building where I ran into when we closed the door, you could hear the Gestapo and Germans being outside, speaking and like celebrating and all this. I mean, in the group of people that had to watch this, there were mothers of some of the sons that were being hung, and wives, and children, because of some fathers and so on. They gave an order, if anybody cries or yells or anything, they're going to shoot. That's why they had those machine guns surrounding us. So it was horrible. Well, there were rumors. There were rumors. We had, like I said before, there were no telephones, no communication, no newspapers. But there were rumors. Every so often one person escaped and ran to the other ghetto. Well, there was another ghetto called in Mlawa, M-L-A-W-A. And that similar incident happened there. And the rumor was that when they liquidate a ghetto, like the smaller ghettos, and they take those people away and they close it up, they don't know where they're taking them, but they never return. So my mother, we were about close to 80 people from my mother's side, mostly from my mother's side in the family in the ghetto. Well, some had small children, some were sick, but my mother and her 2 sisters, they were young girls, and my brother and I, and one of my mother's other sisters, 3 boys. So there was 8 of us. My 2 aunts and my mother decided that they're going to take the 5 boys and we're going to escape from the ghetto. Said we're just going to run out and hopefully we don't get caught, and maybe a month or 2 the war will be over, and maybe some of us, like this. I happened to know somebody from the outside, on the other side of the ghetto, a Gentile family. And the reason I knew them was because I was sneaking in milk for one of my aunt's little child into the ghetto.
How were you doing that?
Well, there was, like I said, there was a fence, but you could, what we did is, I had the thing hanging on one nail on top, being a small little child, but we were being watched all the time, but at night, and this family used to, we got acquainted with, and they had a cow or whatever, and they were helping us with the milk, this one particular family. And when we were preparing to escape, I asked if I could have a cross. Because we were discussing, when my mother was discussing, that we can't go the way we are, we have to do some changes. I remembered in my hometown, and there was a Gentile family living next to us, and their name was Dulchevsky. And she had a son by the name of Waclaw. And when they, right on the first day when the bombs were and machine guns were over our city, Mrs. Dulchevsky and her son Waclaw never returned. So we didn't know what happened to them. And we were still there a few weeks. So I knew they didn't return. So it came in my mind that that would be a good idea, since Waclaw and I were the same age. And I knew quite a bit about, his mother and so on, that I'm going to be this Waclaw, since he disappeared then. And that's how I picked that name. So when I was escaping from the ghetto.
This non-Jewish family that provided you with a cross,
yeah.
Did they provide you with anything else, any type of false papers?
No, there was no papers, nothing, except I had the cross. And she gave me a little Bible, a Catholic Bible in Polish, and I read Polish, so I learned some of the prayers, some of the things that you do before you go to sleep, and after a meal, and so on, or before a meal. So I learned by heart pretty good. It was very frightening, very frightening. The first thing to leave the whole family, and we didn't know where we were going, no idea. And everybody ran their own way. When we got out of the ghetto, luckily we were not caught. We didn't run together at all. We ran, one escaped at one at a time, got through that thing, and we never saw each other after. Well, I ran through fields. I ran to a farmer, and I used to either sneak in where the horses were at the stable, where the cows, sneak up. Usually when it was cold. I used to sneak up and try and sleep, whatever. And to some farms I walked up and talked, and they were afraid. They said, "You have no papers, nothing. You can't stay here." And the summer wasn't bad, because I could eat from trees, fruit. There's a lot of fruit, apple trees and pear trees and cherry trees. So I could throw myself on that. And then also I used to take corn and up and eat, just corn, wheat, actually, not the corn that we eat here, corn, but the small little kernels. And I used to eat that and drink water from the river. And I used to usually go to a different area when it got dark. And when it rained, I was soaking wet, and I smelled, and I had no change of clothes and nothing. So I lived like an animal. And every so often, some farmer maybe that I ran into helped me. There were some individuals. Well, if you want to survive, and like I said, I didn't, and the rumors were, again, always rumors. There are no Jews in this city, and there are no Jews in that city, and the farmers that they were talking. And that's it, that's the end. And here I'm thinking, well, I'll be the only one that will survive. And I was thinking to myself, as a matter of fact, at some farms, they said, well, we can keep you here, you can watch the cows, the pastures. I was a pasture with a dog. Well, I used to since I went to Cheder when I was a little boy in Dobrzhin, I remembered the prayers, the daily prayers, and the Kaddish, because my father died before the war. So I went to shul to say Kaddish for a year, so I remembered this. And some of the holidays, and I thought I'll be the only one that will survive and start a new, I mean, I had all these ideas. So it was very...
So you felt a great sense of responsibility
Yeah.
as a young boy?
Yes.
The Jewish knowledge.
Right.
the
I
knowledge
did.
of your religion, you had to carry on because
Yes.
you didn't know how many other Jews were going to survive.
That's right, exactly. And according to the rumors, none. And I ran in, like I said, to some nice people, but mostly some of the farmers, they were very anti-Semitic. Not knowing that I was Jewish. It's just that the comments, the jokes, and the things. And I was Waclaw Dulchevsky with a cross, and that was it. Yeah, there were some anti-Semitic comments about we won't have any Jews in our town anymore and stuff like this. Well, being in Poland is a very Catholic country, and the churches used to teach their kids, so infants, Jews, the Christ killers, they killed our God and stuff like this. Well, I more or less had to go along with all these things. I'm Waclaw Dulchevsky now. So as a matter of fact, some houses they used to say to their kids, look at Waclaw, he doesn't, he prays and he's a good Catholic home, stuff like that. Well, one winter is when it was really rough that I almost gave up. My hands in spring, I must have frozen my fingers through the winter. And they were swollen and they were hurting, but when it came toward spring, they became ugly. I looked like I was going to lose my fingers. And I had nowhere to go and no choice, and I was walking down a little stream. I don't know where I was. A little river, and there was a lady washing clothes. Now, this is from the time I escaped from the ghetto. I was Waclaw Dulchevsky, and I'm not Jewish and all that. It's like somebody was telling me, tell this lady the truth, she's going to help you. It's like somebody pushing you. And I walked up to this lady, and she knew right away. She says, you Jewish? And I said, yes. Just like I said, that's the first time in all the hidings, I admit it. And she says, please, stay here in this field, here by the, when it gets real nice and dark, I'll come with my daughter and take you to my house. And she almost I could say she saved my life, because like I said, I was giving up. And she came with her daughter and took me, but she said, don't tell my daughter who you are. After, she wanted the kids to know. And she took me in the house, and I remember like today, she was a poor lady. She had a couple cows or something. And she made butter with a stick like this.
The churn.
Yeah. And took it in to the city to get some kind of salve. And that was like black market thing. The people in the city needed a little butter because everything was rationed or whatever. And she needed to heal my hands. Because I remember she put them in warm water, and I don't know what she put in, Epsom salt or some kind of thing. Well, I was there for 3 months hidden in her house. She healed, because I could see it was getting small. The wounds were closing, it was getting, and she healed my hands. But she said, I can't stay here forever. That's when she advised me to go to this farm across the river because they're going to need me there. It's a big farm, and they're going to need a guy like me to help. And that's where I wound up. But when I walked in there, she says, yes, I'll take you, but you have to be legally on the door, because there were rules in everywhere in Poland, how many people, what their names are. Not only people. In the farms, they had to tell how many chickens, how many pigs, and everything else.
So they had the counting.
Everything. The Germans had that all the sure. And the bigger farms had to donate to the German army, you know, so many eggs and so many pigs and everything. They just had to deliver and take it away. And I, at that point, I didn't know where to go, what to do. I said, okay, we'll go to the German office and see if I can get legally, you know, as long as my name would be on the door, I'm legally living there, and that's it. And I did. We took a horse and wagon, and we went. And
you went to the German office?
yeah, with swastikas on the building and everything, and I was just, I figured maybe they will find out, you know. But I had no choice at that point, and we walked in, and they questioned me in Polish. Of course, I could understand German a little bit. But, and I told them the story, how that my mother and I, when there were bombs, and I don't know, my mother disappeared, we got separated within all the shooting and everything. And I've been just helping different farms. I've been going through different places, and that's how I arrived here. And, you know, they questioned me a little more. And she said, you know, I delivered to the German government so many eggs or so many things, and I have a big farm, and that pleased the German official. And now I'm going to be working for him, and so we'll produce more.
So you passed the test?
So, yeah, and I was officially on the door with my name, Waclaw Dulchevsky, living with, working. No pay, no nothing, but at least I had food and some old clothes and, you know, stuff. They weren't very nice people, it turns out. And also at meals, many meals were jokes about Jews and stuff. And, but I went along with all of this. And I didn't want them to know who I really was, just that I was a nice Catholic boy, Waclaw Dulchevsky. One day, and I was sleeping above the, where the horses were, about in the stable, there was hay, and you walked up a ladder, and that's how I slept on top. And one day, in the middle of the night, there was a flashlight in my face. When I got up with uniforms, that's it. That's the end. They're going to take me in the backyard, shoot me, or whatever they're going to do. So I didn't really, I kept on saying, but they were speaking in Polish, these uniform people, and they told me to get up and get down. They didn't know who I was, I didn't know who they were. But when we got down to the yard, and I see this guy and another guy, and they were running in and out of the houses, changing horses and all this. I didn't know what was going on, and then I recognized one of the guys.
From where?
From the ghetto. He was a policeman, like I told you. There was Jewish police within inside the ghetto, and I recognized one of the guys. So I realized that this is
was this perhaps the first familiar
Partisans. Back then? Yes. This was one, right, in years. The first one. And, well, I was very glad, and they were, whatever they had to do,
You
they
described
did.
them as partisans?
Yes. And there were a couple Russian partisans, and this guy, the only guy that I knew, but they were all wearing uniforms. Not all of them had uniforms, but most of them did. But they all had ammunition, guns. And
You joined them at this point?
at that point, well, this guy that knew me from the ghetto told me that I have to go with them. Well, I wasn't an active, they didn't give me a gun and all this, but I was with them. And we traveled in rural areas from farm to farm, but it was, at that time, things looked up a little better because there were no gendarmes or Germans coming in any rural areas because they were getting killed. They had plans for certain things, what to bomb and what to put a mine under a railroad track to blow up the trains. And if there were some Germans within the vicinity, and prior to this, let's say a year or two, the Germans used to have a cottage guy with a uniform, and he was sitting in the back with a big cigar with the swastikas, and they used to ride around. Well, there was no such a thing at that point because they were shooting at them, so they were afraid. So these were the kind of things that were happening, so that's why it was a little bit easier for me. But not all of them went to a mission. There were some that were assigned, like 2 or 3, and the rest of us stayed. And then they came back and they congratulated each other about the job well done, whatever they did. Well, like I said, I was still a little kid, a teenager. And we were a few miles from a road, a main road, and we heard that the Germans are moving away, that they are running towards Germany. And this one morning we thought there were still German tanks and German trucks moving. It turned out there were already Russians. The Russian army was progressing. Well, we found out like maybe an hour or 2 later, by foot, a Russian patrol, and they were all girls. For some reason. The patrol that I first saw when I got completely freed was Russian girls who were short with grenades stuck in their belts. I think those were the ones that used to throw themselves under the tanks to blow up tanks. But anyway, there was the Russian, that were Russians already. And that's how I got freed. Well, I went back to my hometown. Wasn't far. So I went back. I don't remember how I traveled by train all the way. But anyway, I went back and hoping I'd find my mother, my brother, or somebody. Nothing.
What did you find?
Didn't find anybody. Nobody at that point. Oh, I ran into one man that was in the Polish army that I remember as a child. He had a drugstore, apothec, they called it at that time. And I had an aunt that lived not far from him, so I knew his name was Pieniek. So I knew Mr. Pieniek. He was, I don't know what rank you would say in the English, but he was a porucznik in the Polish, in that army. And he is the one that told me I should take a train and go to Warsaw. Because in Warsaw, you see, where I was going is closer to Germany at that point. Warsaw was already freed by the Russians, maybe a week earlier, maybe 2 weeks or whatever, maybe a month. But he says you go there and there is already some kind of homes for orphans and stuff like this. So I went to Warsaw. And from there, they told me I should go to Lodz. And Lodz was already forming a kibbutz. That's what they called it at that time. So that's where I was, in Lodz. Because we had some leaders, somebody that was in a kibbutz or in Zionist organizations before the war. Maybe they were 15, 18, and now they're 20-some years old. They survived, and they're the ones that organized with some of the kids, one from here, one from there. We didn't know each other, but anyway, in Lodz is where I was in a kibbutz. And we were learning Hebrew, and we had classes, and we lived in a commune with a big kitchen, and we were learning to do some other kids were taking some trades. There was already an art. Everything went fast right at the beginning there. To learn how to be a cabinet maker, vacations. Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, and there was no Israel at that time. So we were also being trained how we're going to sneak in. Now we're going to go from here to this country, then to Italy, then we're going to take this ship and we're going to try to get to Palestine, but we are going to get caught and wind up in Cyprus. All these kind of things, we were being prepared. I became very active, very Zionistic. And some of my friends, they had like a group of 12 is leaving on such and such a day, and then the rest remain, and once in a while 2 or 3 they brought in that they found somewhere, and they brought them into. So anyway, and I stayed longer, and because some of my friends wound up being on the Exodus ship. I mean, this goes a little later on, but I mean, they wanted me to stay in Lodz in Poland a little longer, maybe the next transfer. Well, finally came my turn. So we were in a kibbutz in Landsberg. And let me just say one quick thing. It turns out that Landsberg is the city where Hitler wrote Mein Kampf, where he was in jail. And our kibbutz in Landsberg was up the hill that every day I was walking by the jail where Hitler sat and wrote the book Mein Kampf. But just coincidental. Well, anyway, and the kibbutz in Germany was a regular kibbutz, but it was advanced, and there were some sabras that were visiting us, and speeches and different things. And one day I was going to a soccer match, and on the railway station there were 2 American soldiers. This was on the American zone, of course, near Munich. And they were speaking Yiddish, and I walked up and said, do you know my tante? Where are you from? And they said, from Brooklyn. I said, oh, then you know my tante Sarah Neumann. That was my father's sister. And they laughed. But anyway, to make it short, they said, we write to our parents every day, every week. Well, give us your name, where you're staying. And I gave him my name and address in Landsberg. And a month later, I received a letter from my tante, my aunt, my father's sister, Sarah Neumann, from Brooklyn. And she is the one that changed me not to go to Palestine and all that, because she says, you're the only survivor, and your father was the only boy in the family, and we wanted the Dygola family to go on, and please don't go there. You survived, and you're going to get killed over there, fighting for... And she's the one that changed, and that's how I registered to go to Canada, because to the United States was going to take a lot longer on the Polish border, and somehow the Jewish Congress from Canada was sponsoring 500 orphans. So in print, This was an orphanage from all over, from Romania, from Hungary, from children that wanted to immigrate and leave Europe, but mainly to Canada. And this is how I wound up in Canada. And I arrived in Canada, in Montreal, and I was going to make my home, and I became a citizen, first paper citizen, not quite. Applied
When did you arrive here in the United States?
In the United
I'm sorry,
to
in
Canada,
Montreal.
1948. And it was pretty normal. I was learning to be a furrier and all this until one day a friend of mine saw an ad in the paper. Eva Dygola, living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, is looking for anybody from her family. And that's how I found my mother. Had he not seen this ad, I would have been living in Montreal and whatever. But anyway, so this is how it happened. Through the newspaper, we found each other. With just out of the 8 that escaped, 5 survived. And the ones that did not escape, none of them survived, not a one. All the kids and all the aunts and uncles, they're all disappeared.
And when did you arrive here in the United States, in Milwaukee?
In 1950. I even know the date, September 7th. Yeah.
And how have you made your living these past years?
Well, at first, when I came, not knowing English and all this, and with my mother, and we lived together, and my mother bought a grocery store one day. So we worked together in a grocery store. And then when I got married, the grocery store wasn't big enough but we became 2 families.
And your wife's name?
It's Renee.
And how many children do you have?
2 sons.
And their names?
Jeff and Sean. Yeah.
And
and a daughter-in-law, Wynn. My youngest son, Sean, is mine. That something like this should never happen. There shouldn't be allowed to happen. Or any similarity to something like this. Of course, it hurts me when I see in the paper there are things in other parts of the world that are happening, and it's just terrible. And this is a picture of my dad and my father. When he was performing in the theaters in Poland. It's too bad that he died at such a young age, at age 37. This is a picture I'm very fortunate to have, because this is a picture, probably the only one in existence. It's a picture of my grandfather and my grandmother and my father in the middle and his 4 sisters. And my father was the only boy in the family. And this is a very, very dear picture to me to have. And I'm fortunate because this picture was sent to one of my father's sisters in Argentina, which is the one on the end, on the left. And since I'm the only one that survived, she sent me that picture. So I'm real glad to have it. And this is our family picture. My father, my mother, myself, and my little brother Shmuel. The one that didn't make it. He did not survive the Holocaust. So it looked like we were a very nice family. And that's a very nice picture of us. Brings back a lot of memory. And this is a picture of my brother and myself. And I also remember when we went to have this picture taken, I got along with my brother very well, and I miss him. And it's sad, but I'm happy to have this picture. And this is a write-up about finding my mother And this was written up in 1950 in the Milwaukee Journal. And how I found my mother, and I lived in Canada, and so on. So this is it's 45 years old. Well, this is what I wrote, the verse that about the 20 people that got in the ghetto that got hung. And I wrote a verse about this. So this is, I wrote it in Yiddish, and this is what it is.